I want to briefly talk about the blue screens because it kind of sets up for the next discussion we're going to make about LED screens and about volumes. Most people that I speak on Twitter, on social media, and also on Discord thought that this show was done on a volume.
The volume thing is interesting because I think there were some scenes on that meteor planet, or when they're in a train, that seemed very suited to shooting on an LED volume. Yeah. And then as does perhaps some of the scenes on the void, where the void is, you know. Yeah. And also because people heard that ILM was the main vendor or a vendor, and their ILM has their stagecraft set up for LED volume shooting. But I don't think I was that surprised in the end to hear that it wasn't an LED wall shoot, Hugo. And that's based on the fact that they clearly had to get this show up and running quickly. Yeah. Maybe they didn't anticipate COVID, sure. But also Marvel, you know, every film or show that I've covered from a visual effects point of view, I always hear that the show comes together in the edit. Yeah. And that's Marvel saying that they do it in the edit. It's not like some defensive thing where they say, well, we're doing it because we didn't know what we were doing. It's just that that's the way they do it. Now, if you're doing LED wall volume shooting, you can't. Yeah. You have to make decisions in pre-production. Yeah. You know, in terms of the environments and whatever.
I can even tell you, Ian, that is a fact. It's not even just Marvel assuming. I have talked with many friends all over the world in companies that work in Marvel Productions, and they all told me things go until the wire, until the last week. Everything keeps changing and changing and changing and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. But I have heard from multiple people. I've never worked on a Marvel show, but I have heard from either people on set and also people off-set in VFX companies as well, that they have a lot of layers of decision making. It takes a long time to get things approved, and there's a lot of last-minute changes, and things really flow in a creative point after it was shot. So it doesn't really, I don't think, you're right, I don't think it would fit a volume shoot, but it's because I think people are now so convinced everything is shot on a volume, and I have to hand it over to Epic. They've managed to convince everyone that everything was going to be from a volume from now on, which is furthest from the truth. Like, we will still have traditional filmmaking for years to come. A volume cannot replace every pipeline, just like we discussed. Marvel doesn't like to make decisions like that. They prefer to make decisions on a creative method more to the end of the production so that they have time to think about things and time to go through everything. So not always a volume will work for a production. I think people forget about that. You know?
I also think it's more shot or scene related. Like Marvel is using volumes, like on Thor, the new Thor God and Thunder. Yeah, I might have got the name wrong there. Yeah. In Sydney, they absolutely are using stagecraft. Yeah, but it just creatively, I can also see how the void, with so much meant to be happening in the background, as in animation of, you know, that Goliath creature, and whatnot. To have that working in a real-time way for, you know, huge scenes just might not have been possible, and also might have slowed the production down. That's another part.
But here's the thing that I'm going to tell you, which again was told to me, and I'm not going to mention what show it was or who it was, but most of these productions that are still shot on a volume anyway, like, I'm not saying Thor was one of them, but most of these productions, you end up rotoscoping and replacing the background anyway. A lot of them, they do that anyway, because then they change their minds or they have to tweak. Or not to mention, there's like problems with the moe effect of the screens. There's problems with integration with the screens. And also sometimes the CG on the screen doesn't look as good as they would have hoped. So there is I was speaking with the lead composer about this, and he was telling me that actually sometimes it becomes worse to have it on the volume because it became so much harder to rotoscope into key to replace something if they're replacing it with something different from what they shot, you know. If they're keeping a similar background, then it's fine. But if they replace it with something else, then you have all sorts of problems with the edges, with brighter edges, light wrapping, spill of light, all sorts of issues that then become even harder than doing keying with the green screen and the blue screen, you know. So there's a lot of complication there that is not really mentioned anywhere when they talk about these things, because I don't think, you know, Epic is very keen on selling this idea that this all works flawlessly, and it doesn't really.
I would say there's more people than just Epic doing it, but you're dead right. They're one of the leading forces.
Yeah,
I think you're right. There's a view out there that they can do in-camera VFX with an LED wall in it. That's all you need to do. And I've definitely covered productions where that's not the case. Yeah. But some of the benefits of it are obvious, like light interaction, or the actors performing on these volumes just seem to love it because they used to have to look into the green void or blue void, and they no longer feel like they have to.
I guess, Ian, we're already on our next topic, aren't we? Because we are, to be honest.
We are. Yes, the thing that Hugo and I wanted to segue into was our usual topic of the biggest VFX tech thing right now. And I mean, we have talked about LED walls and volumes, but because of this discussion with Loki, and in particular, Hugo, a short film that Epic released recently showcasing some Unreal Engine 427 tech in terms of in-camera effects and LED walls. We thought we'd talk about it, and I feel like we have. We
have. I have a few other things that I want to talk about that short film, but that's why I said it was a segue so people were aware that we're not talking about Loki anymore. The reason why I want to talk about this is because of this short film. That's why I've suggested to you, Ian, because this short film came out. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a. But I thought this thing was very impressive. This is one of the best productions they've done so far. Using Unreal. This is showcasing their new tools with volume. And man, the shots, I mean, obviously, I know everyone always like just talks about the good stuff. I don't want to spend too much time on the good stuff because everyone has already talked about it. I do have some comments, some negative aspects from that short film that I would like to address, and also keeping in mind that I'm sure these will be ironed out. But I must say that, you know, the beginning, when they're just inside the car, it's literally flawless. It looks photoreal when they're inside the car.
Yeah.
The reflections passing through, the ones on the background. Literally, if you need to shoot a car scene, this is now the way to shoot it. There's no other comment, unless you need the car to maybe drift too much or jump, or if you need a lot of dirt or things on the screen. I mean, obviously, if it's an action film, maybe you prefer to put the cameras on the car, just like they do in Fast and Furious. But if you're just shooting a conversation on a car, which we see on films all the time, this is the way to do it, because, man, it looks flawless. I have nothing to say. They just change the way that you can shoot a shot like this, because normally it usually is a green screen or a blue screen, and then they have lights passing through, and then they shake the car a bit, and it's it looks stunning. I thought it was.
Can I bring something up with you then? I agree with you. It raises the point about this is an amazing technology, and everyone has jumped on the bandwagon and talked about LED wall as a solution. But I guess, Hugo, what you're really saying is, and this clip shows you, is that it's a solution as long as everything comes together.
Yes.
As in the real-time rendering of it, the lighting of it, the shooting of it. In the same way that if you shot this with a bad green screen, poorly lit green screen, it would look crap.
Yes.
So I'm just saying that maybe what you're getting at a little bit is the evangelism behind LED wall.
Yes.
LED walls
can
never take over the general professionalism that's needed on set to shoot these things. And just to take that one step further, it's possibly why Mandalorian look so good.
Yeah.
Whether or not they replaced some of these in-camera LED wall shots is because it's the killer team, right? The killer team.
And it makes sense. That's the thing. When you, it makes sense for the story. Man, he has a reflective suit. How else are you going to do it? You know, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Without having to clean everything up and rebuilding him in CG, you know, which makes no sense. So I feel like people are getting into the bandwagon and making it almost like a religion, getting really defensive about it. And and I just want everyone to consider that this should always be a choice. It should always be like, in certain productions, it works really well. In certain productions, it won't work. And in certain productions, maybe there's other ways of doing it. And on this specific short film, the car section is flawless. But then if you go in the rest of the short film, I'll give you a few things that I didn't thought it was that flawless and actually pretty bad. Like the trees, for example, on the background, they look terrible. The CG of the trees, they're not very well made. They are a bit repetitive. They look like they're repetitive assets, really. And the way that they're moving looks a bit noisy, really doesn't hold up. You also have another problem. When they are on the wide shot, when the car parks up, the lighting is not enough for an outdoors. You can really see that the light is not strong enough to look like they're outdoors. Man, you live in Australia. You know how much the sun hits. Like, man, this is not looking like the sun is there. There is no glare. There is no bloom from the sun. There is no actual highlight hitting them properly. As much as they're pretending it's the end of the day, we've all been outside. It doesn't look like that. It looks incredibly fake. And I think it's because the volume doesn't have enough light to pump into this. That's one of my problems. Then other problems I see a bit fake is like when she's inside the cave with the flashlight, when the flashlight is hitting the CG environment, which is a really clever thing with having a synchronized flashlight hitting the background of the wall. But the problem is the technology, the lighting quality doesn't look very good. The shadows look a bit fake. The reflections, the light hitting the rock is very reflective. It's very glossy. It doesn't look really photoreal. I think that's just a problem from the engine, which will improve, I'm sure. So these two problems I'm discussing could be improved. The volume lighting could be improved with better LEDs, with better volumes, with more nits per screen, with more power on luminance on each screen, which could be solved. As we've seen, even on Mandalorian, some shots, they've managed to do it. The flashlight can be solved with better CG in real time. So I guess as Unreal evolves, it gets better and better and better, so you can get better quality flashlight. So, and then for me, the last thing that was a problem for me was that when you're outdoors like this with a car, there's always dust in the air, and there's always dust getting up by the tires, and you always have this atmospheric thing flying through, little particles, little dust things, little things floating in the air, and sometimes you see them in bokeh even because they're just floating. That was also missing, I think. So there's a lot of things that really makes me think that this is a great start, but it's not really there yet. You know,
I would also recast this as a short film, as not being a short film. It literally is a test, and almost a feature demo. And what they're showing is features from 427 of Unreal Engine that's not out, that are not out. And I think some of the things you've mentioned I've read as well, that people said, well, okay. And I actually, Hugo, think that's a good thing, because wouldn't it be cool if people went away with these features and outdid this test?
Oh, they will. I'm sure they will.
So I'm trying not to be defensive of it just for the point of it, but I kind of think it's a bit like when you used to see a new thing in Maya, and it was just like a simple character. It wasn't like Davy Jones or something like that, right? And the reason they do it as a simple character is just to show you what can be done. I mean, that's how I took away the video.
I'm being devil's advocate on this because I know my view of criticizing this is very unpopular, because I know whenever I post this, people are very defensive, and they attack me quite often when I start. But I can't avoid it. I'm a VFX supervisor. I am built to notice if something is not correct. And so I did notice immediately the flicker on the first go that I watched it. I immediately saw the lighting. I immediately saw the flashlight quality. I can't help it because I'm a VFX soup. That's what I do. I do notes of shots. So I immediately made a bunch of notes and thought, oh, this is wrong. That's wrong. This needs to be fixed. And again, all these things can be fixed in comp. That's the thing. In comp and in CG and replacement and things like that. I think that so I'm being devil advocate. I think it's very impressive, but I just want everyone to just calm down because I am I'm a bit worried about how this discussion goes. Like, it's like, oh, we can now film like this forever. And that is so further from the truth. We've discussed this already many times on this show. Like I feel like we've already discussed the fact that certain shots we cannot do on a stage, certain stunts. We just saw that on Fast and Furious. We will see that on Top Gun. We will see that on Mission Impossible. There's a lot of things that you need to go on set. But I want to go one step further, and I want to talk about what happens on set from a creative point of view, which a lot of you listening might not know because you've never been on set. Whenever you go on set, there is this creative flowing happening that kind of goes between the DOP, the director, the VFX supervisor, everyone involved, the cameraman, the crew, the lighting crew, the gaffer, everyone. And especially when you're in location, it really shines because if you have the correct crew, things happen on set. Like you suddenly find a better corner on a building. Oh shit, that corner looks better. Or you find the lighting. Oh man, at this hour, 12:25, this is perfect. The light is hitting the ceiling and it's hitting the shadow and it's really nice. Let's shoot, let's film. And also like the actors, sometimes the actors come up with a new line or they come up with a new thing or they pick up a different object or they pick up another object or they open a door or they go somewhere else on the stage instead of the place where you thought he was going. So this thing that happens on set that really builds most of the films we know today, especially the really famous films and the masterpieces in cinema, it's a mixture between you prepare things, you make a plan, but then it goes off rails. Sometimes the plan goes off rails. There's a lot of spontaneity. There's a lot of things that come up on set. And I'm a bit worried that when you're on a volume like this with pre-made assets, with pre-renders of everything, that this spontaneity goes away because it's so sterile, it's so hard for you to be experimental when you are on a stage like this where everything is already prepped to be in that way. So I have that problem with this. Not that I thought this technology is amazing and it will change cinema forever, but I just want people to still try to keep this flow of creativity. And sometimes, even if you shoot on a volume, maybe we need to replace the background because it didn't work out. It could happen, it still could happen.
I mean, everyone wants to go and film in the middle of Africa.
Of course, I know.
If they're doing a Saharan film or something like that. But I suppose the promise or the opportunity here is that sometimes you don't need to leave Pinewood to do something, and therefore you're saving costs. The other promise, Hugo, possibly, but more work needs to be done, is that creativity and ability to change things, change the view, change the sun, is enabled at least a little bit by real time.
It doesn't. No, that's where people think it's true. It's not. That's the thing. It's not. Because
it's
when you're
enabled
on set,
more than just shooting on a green screen stage, surely.
No, I'm not talking about shooting on a green screen. I'm talking about going physically to a location. Yes, I am. Because, what we just saw in this short film, this could have been shot on location. It could have been on a cave. This entire thing normally would have been on the Grand Canyon, and then you would have had a cave, and then you would have shot it there. There's no need for a VFX for what they shot. No need. It's literally a crew on a desert filming it, and then you find a nice cave and you shoot it. I'll be honest.
Well, if you can't find the cave.
But you will. You'll find something, and then you will work with what you have. That's the problem. I feel like from a creative point of view, people are relying too much on, we have infinite opportunities. No. That's not how good film is made. Good film is made when you don't have opportunities and you don't have everything, and then you have to work with what you have. That's why films become so creative, because you have problems and you have challenges. You cannot overcome the challenges, so you make shit up while you're there, and that will never change. I am just concerned that you go to a stage and someone like a director comes in and someone turns to you and says, "Okay, so we can have anything here," and we're gonna be like, "Oh, okay, what are we gonna do then? Oh, I don't know." Like, it's really, I feel that not having all asset to everything, not having all the capabilities, drives creativity and makes films more interesting. I believe this really on my bone, because I've been on set so many times and things happen out of the blue by a problem. Problems lead to solutions. And I'm a bit worried that this becomes a bit too sterile and it becomes a bit too pipelined and too technical. I thought the short was really impressive, but I didn't saw anything on the short that couldn't just been done on a forest somewhere or on a stage somewhere. That's the thing.
Okay, you know? I think I get that completely, and maybe it comes back to the thing we were talking about, which is where this technology works depends on the project.
Yeah,
it works for alien space environments because you can't get those on Earth. You know, unless you go out to Jordan and shoot in the desert where every Ridley Scott film is made. Oh, did I just say that out loud?
Iceland as well. Like, he goes to Iceland a lot.
Well, that's sort of my point, is that there's only so many films that can use the black sands of Iceland.
I know.
For that alien
I get that.
landscape.
I get that. Ian, like, I'm being the devil advocate here. I'm just like opening a discussion that I don't see anyone having. Like, I feel like people... Well, I'll be honest. Like, I've heard more. Like, if you hear sometimes the Roger Deakins podcast, the Team Deakins podcast, they do mention this a few times. Not about the volume directly, but the way how creativity works on set and how things change on set on the go. He talks a lot about that, and I completely agree with him. Having been on set as many times as I've been, I feel that there's like something happens when you have all this collective thinking, trying to solve a problem in the middle of nowhere, and I don't want to lose that. That's the thing. I feel that, like, the volumes, or I don't want to sound like the old guy that doesn't want technology. Man, I'm one of the most technological people that you probably know. Like, I'm very high technology. I just want everyone to kind of consider that there are choices, and sometimes it's a good choice and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just easier to go to a street and film the street than making the street on Unreal. I'm just making that proposition that sometimes there are other ways of doing things, and the old ways are not to just be thrown away. I feel this is the same discussion we were having about 2D a few weeks ago. You know, when 2D became out of fashion, everyone dropped it, and now everyone is trying to get back to it. I don't want people to just drop everything because there's a new shiny toy. We should all kind of work together and, like, maybe use the volume sometimes, maybe use on set sometimes, and just kind of use it to its full potential from a creative point of view, to the benefit of the filmmaking.
Well,
not just because
maybe that's happening.
No, it's I see people. I see people on LinkedIn. Putting posts saying, "Oh, I'm gonna do a volume production. Don't know what it is yet, but I can't wait to do it." And it's like, what? You're just doing it because it's a volume production? You do it in purpose because you want to do? It's just because they want to be hip and they want to sound cool because they said, "I've done a volume production." And I don't want to go into that kind of territory because we've been here before with the 2D and with other things that kind of went out of fashion and now they're back. You know, so that's
I think you're right. You're grabbing on to what most filmmakers want, which is some sort of much more practical, aesthetically interesting, pleasing, visceral experience that LED walls feels just like being on a soundstage.
Yeah.
And, you know, however, the clear reason for it is sometimes, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. That's one reason. Cost is another. There are certain locations you can't go out and shoot
That's true.
if your story requires it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to bring up one thing here. There is a really great American cinematographer article, the cover feature from the latest issue, which has a couple of has a story on a couple of what seem to be upcoming productions, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
And I liked the way that those were framed. Like one of them is one that requires ocean plates.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a clear way that they've gone and shot the array for those to be used on a LED volume. There's amazing examples of is it a like a 911 fire series, and the street scene looks, I mean, it's just a still that I've seen.
Yeah.
It looks fantastic.
When they're inside the ambulance, it looks stunning. Yeah.
So I think it really is, we're kind of saying the same thing. It'll work if it works.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Shot.
But that's what happened on The Mandalorian. If you go back and watch the behind the scenes of The Mandalorian, sometimes they're on stage, sometimes they're outdoors. They're not always on a volume, although people think they're always on a volume. There's a lot of shots, especially that big train sequence when they're like going between on this big forest planet. That entire thing was done in location in a backlot, you know, with some green screen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on as well. That's the thing. Like, that's what I'm just a bit fed up of watching people booking volumes to make experimental tests instead of just, okay, here's my film. This shot needs to be on the volume. That shot needs to not be on the volume. This shot needs to be outside. This shot needs to be on a green screen. What's the problem with that? You don't have to suddenly just throw away everything and just do everything on a volume. Just like this short film, the beginning inside the car looks stunning. The rest could have been done in a different way, I think. So I feel like to make it look better, you know, you could have the outside door, you could have probably put like a 10K light to make a better, more light scene, put it on a green screen, and you would have had like a brighter environment to put in. So, and then you would have offline rendering as well.